Several years ago, I was in the midst of an acrimonious divorce from my then husband, full of crazy allegations and typical angry feelings centered around the custody of our child. As with many divorces, friends and professional colleagues seem to pick one side or the other. Well, in my case, there was one sort of professional contact who reached out to me after hearing about the divorce, who offered to be a part of a witness for my case because of some experiences he related to that I had been previously unaware of regarding my ex's behavior out of networking events. After this initial call, he started calling on a semi-regular basis to make sure I was okay. This wasn't someone I knew well prior to the separation, and he was much older than I was, but claimed to have experience with divorce and custody, and I figured it was a good idea to be polite and not alienate him, since his testimony was important, per my lawyer. I kept things friendly, but I always had a weird feeling about him. After a few months, he called one day that my son was very sick, and when I told him I couldn't talk and explained why, he offered to run to the store for me, which I honestly appreciated, but after that, he was stopping by the house uninvited, or he would stop by with cookies for my son, etc. Again, I kept telling myself to keep things polite. The divorce is coming soon. Don't make this guy mad. He had called me out of the blue, and I was worried at the point that I was walking a very fine line, being polite and clearly not interested. And if that he got mad, he might decide to go testify for my ex and who knows what. During this time, he had also helped me set up a security cam system my dad had mailed me, and at one point I needed someone to walk my dog, and he'd offered to do it. He used, in return, a spare key the same day. One evening he showed up, I was painting, and instead of sticking around to help, even though I was having a starting over therapist and wanted to do it alone. Just after the painting day, he came around, uninvited and unannounced, with magazine photos of decor and started carrying on his manic way about how we could finish decorating the house. I was so weirded out that I made an excuse to leave, starting ignoring his calls, and took my son and dog to stay with my parents for several weeks to avoid a drop-in. I came home just for custody exchanges. I came home a few weeks later, thinking he would have gotten the hint, and it was a quiet day. The following morning, I took my son on an outing, something like the zoo, and we both came back hot and tired. I put my kiddo down for a nap in my bed and decided to close my eyes with him. I woke up maybe an hour or so later, and it took me a moment to realize something was way off. As I'm blinking off the sleep, I realized there was a rose bush sitting on my bedside table that I most definitely did not put there. There was a post-it note on it, something about planting in the yard. I started shaking immediately because I recognized the handwriting and stood up to go splash some water in my face and decide whether to call my parents or the police. I didn't want any trouble because of the divorce. As I stepped into my bathroom, I realized that the mirror was covered in post-it notes, all with super creepy messages that were intended like love notes or with infection, but which all scared me. I was still waking up and trying to figure out how these notes could possibly have gotten into my house. My front door was definitely locked, but as I went room to room, there were notes everywhere. I mean, hundreds of post-it notes covering the walls and my cabinets. There was even one inside my coffee maker. I started grabbing all of them and putting them into a pile, and when I got to one in the kitchen, that made my blood run cold. It said, "You're cute when you think no one is watching you." And I realized that there was a security camera pointed right where that note was left. The one he had helped me set up months ago, when I didn't think he was a psychopath. I called my parents in hysterics, sent them both a bunch of photos, and my dad insisted I should not call the police. Remember? Custody battle. But that he would drive over and change the locks and put a chain on the door. We also immediately changed the passwords on the security cameras, which had been installed on the document if my ex tried to break into the house. So there was one on the front porch, but 3 inside the house, including one in my bedroom. This man could apparently see and hear everything going on inside my house for months. The security cameras, I I realized he had just paid attention to my passwords when I was setting them up in the system, but the only way I can figure out that he got into my house is that he would have made a copy of my house key the day he had it. And because my dog had gotten to know him, he wouldn't have barked to warn me, which also scared me. I was absolutely horrified. This man had been in my house for a long time. There's no way he could have put that many notes up quickly, and he was right next to my face and feet for my son while we were sleeping, and somehow thought that was okay. I left and stayed with my parents again for a few days, afraid of what the hell he was going to do when he realized that he was now both physically and digitally locked outside of my house. When I came home, my son had gone to his dad's for the night, and I was home alone on the phone with another friend from out of town. At about 10 p.m., this man showed up at the door, pounding on it, trying the locks, screaming obscenities, and demanding to be let into his house. Gone were all the necessities. This was someone completely furious and derailed. All I could do was hide in my bedroom until he left. What felt like an hour later, this was St. Patrick's Day, so I'm sure he had been drinking. After that, there were several other times someone would start knocking on the door in the middle of the night, always when my son wasn't home. I think he was crazy, but not that crazy, and I figured if I called the police he would get in more trouble if my son was there. But he knew the schedule, so I know it wasn't him. He tried reaching out using fake social media accounts several times, always getting blocked. Years later, I discovered that he had friended my mom on Facebook and was therefore still able to see all the photos of us that he posted or shared. And there was a huge argument when I saw she had left her computer logged in. A conversation they were having about me and how he could get back into my life. I saw at the house 2 years later, still finding new notes even as I was packing, and I am more than relieved that he no longer knows where I live. I don't post photos of my new house online, not the front anyway, and I have changed the privacy settings on my social media accounts. I avoid all the places he used to go, the networking events he attends, and I stay under the radar as possible. I could never bring myself to play back the security camera videos because I was traumatized enough and didn't want to see just how much danger we could have been in. Hopefully he never sees this post. But you know who you are. I hope our paths don't cross again. Hope you guys enjoyed today's story. Thank you so much for listening. Huge thanks to the Redditor u/IntelligentPia1026 for this amazingly well written story. Thank you for granting me permission. And that story was super creepy. But once more, hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll see you guys in the next story. So, don't forget to sit back, relax, and indulge in fear.